Welcome back to our second episode of Ask Textile History, where you ask questions and I try to answer some of them. Our first experiment with this was so much fun, so here we are back at the shenanigans again. And first off is Andrea with a Patreon question. She says, "Another thing I'm interested in is the development of different fabrics. For example, in ancient Egypt, they had very fine linen fabric. So why is the linen we have today so different?" And the easy and yet complex answer is that plants change, and industrialization changed what we prioritize when breeding textile fiber plants like cotton and flax. And plants will keep changing into the future as well. They are already adapting to climate change. Plants that are used and domesticated by humans especially change, as we use selective breeding to emphasize the properties we want or try to reduce properties that are deemed less desirable. With fiber plants, prior to the spinning jenny and the Industrial Revolution, they were generally bred to contain longer staple fibers so we could spin fine, strong thread. But a detail that often gets omitted when talking about the spinning jenny is that it was invented and continued getting developed and improved specifically for cotton. But also that all fibers have variations within their species, like there are many different cotton species and there are many different linen fibers, just like there are many different breeds of sheep and other, fiber animals. So the 1760s and 1770s, when the spinning jenny was invented and distributed, was in the middle of the Western cotton boom made affordable and available through enslaved labor in the Americas. Any other textile fiber that wanted to be able to follow in the industrialization of cotton needed to tolerate those machines developed for American cotton fibers. Cotton fibers are typically quite short, about 1 to 2 inches, while linen fibers are much longer at about 1 to 6 inches. And even historically, textile fibers were separated into longer staple fibers and shorter staple fibers, with the longer staple lengths being able to produce finer, thinner thread that, produced garments that were less prone to wear and pilling on the surface. These were, of course, more expensive and reserved only for the wealthiest. But you still see longer staple length cotton being grown and used for higher end clothing today, but that is a far, far cry from the fast fashion most of us have access to that sources material solely based on price. So today, rather than to select flax plants for fiber length, luster, or resilience, we had to breed flax plants with fiber that could tolerate the harsh mechanical process of spinning mills, or it would risk being left behind alongside other fibers and crafts that were deemed too labor intensive when mechanization and industrialization suddenly made things go a whole lot faster. As a result, we no longer have access to the plants they would have been using 100, 1,000, or even more years ago. Do not underestimate the tactile skill and advantage of a good pair of skilled hands. I just cannot reiterate this enough. Machines, efficient though they are, cannot feel what they are working with in the same way that humans can, and they need to rely on sturdy processes where there is a low chance of breakage or failure, so we'll generally land on slightly thicker thread and other procedures, that just in case there's an issue in either direction and then the mill is still running, rather than having a breakage and people having to go in and reset and restart all over again. But this, of course, also leads to a market where a reliably high volume of fiber per acre is more important than almost anything else. A good spinner, on the other hand, can feel what is going on with the fiber they are spinning and make minute adjustments to gossamer thin thread that they may not even decide consciously. They've just been doing this for years and they just feel what they need to do. And that is something that a machine can only dream of. So yeah, the cost of industrialization on one hand robs us of some of the finer skills in favor of convenience and cost. But also literally different breeds and selections of, continuous fiber breeding of different fiber species, but also wool and other species. It's just insane how much industrialization has to say for everything in the whole environment of the world that we haven't really stopped to think about. But then again, there's also the sign that fabrics and fiber develop alongside us is also a really cool thing. Like, Victorians would have different fibers from ancient Egyptians, would have different fibers from Vikings, not just because they prioritize different fibers, but even, the same flax plant would have different growing conditions, would have different priorities, would have different people asking different things of the plants. And that is also really, really cool, I think, anyway. And second, we have Iana, who asks, eco-friendly certification. I know some are just the original growing conditions, and some include things like dyes, but it's really hard to find a simple not destroying the world label. And Iana, I really empathize with you because yes, it is really, really difficult to find a simple not destroying the world label. And it's important to realize that this is by design. This is the industry makes it difficult on purpose. First of all, the less biased certifications are generally, though not always, going to be on a governmental level or collaborative nations such as the EU. So this answer is going to vary depending on where in the world you find yourself. We have seen many, many times that industries will create their own certifications to make their products look better and to compete with other certifications that may not wish to give them the green light. This kind of industry self-regulation is what we in Norway would call, the goat watching the sack of grain, meaning there is no real incentive for them to do anything that does not benefit them. All those beige cardboard labels with green stamps of approval and enticing texts spouting how sustainable the garment is, almost always self-certified and not controlled by any external body. Words are also difficult because they may not mean, in the legally protected sense of the word, if they are indeed legally protected, what you, the consumer, think they mean or associate them with. A good example of this is biodegradable, which, is everywhere these days and is simultaneously both my favorite and least favorite example because of this issue. Because biodegradable does not mean compostable. And even compostable does not mean compostable in a small household composting bin that may or may not have gotten up to those high composting temperatures over longer periods of time. A lot of the time, if you read the fine print on a biodegradable product or, definition of biodegradable legally, you will see that it breaks down only under certain very specific and very controlled environments, such as an industrial scale biodigester or a large municipality-sized compost piles that gets up to some really high temperatures and stay there for a minimum amount of days. And even then, even if you get the biodegradable product into one of those specific conditions, it is not a given that what it breaks down into is any better for the environment. We've had several examples of this in the environmental chemistry field, especially when it comes to pesticides, where a chemical was not persistent as is, but would degrade in nature into a slightly different molecule that was not only more toxic than the original compound, but would also refuse to break down further and accumulated in wildlife. Getting those compounds regulated can be really tricky, because you need to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that what we would call the parent compound is the culprit. Usually by proving that the breakdown product is not used on an industrial scale and could not be responsible for the global distribution that has been observed. Editing Kristine here, just to point out that another reason why I don't think we will ever have a one-size-fits-all, the perfect eco-friendly certification, is that different people, different organizations, different scientists are going to have different priorities as to what, destroying the world means and what they prioritize in terms of eco-friendly certification. Is it the chemicals they use? Is it the overall carbon load? Is it, wildlife reduction? So what is it? And I don't think these really passionate people are going to agree on, a list of these are the priorities and what is the most important, because they're all really important. So that is another thing that also gets reflected in all of these different certifications and why there are so many of them. So there are so many pitfalls to watch out for here. You know what my general advice is going to be, shop used, repair it within an inch of its life, and when you buy new, look for smaller local businesses. But when you do need to look for something new, you are going to have to get to know the certifications that are local to you. So some tips when assessing certifications online: look up who their board of collaborators are. If there are a lot of industry representation, you can feel pretty confident that they can and do exercise their power in the board to get a certification and definitions that are going to be beneficial to them. That's just what they are paid to do when they agree to be on those boards. That's just how it works. What you want to see are researchers, governmental bodies, and sometimes environmental and/or non-profit organizations. But this does get muddy though, as those groups can also be swayed by industry influence and lobbying, and there have been instances where I have gone down, an organization rabbit hole where one after the other have boards full of industry representatives referring to other seemingly independent boards that are also full of industry representatives. So, this isn't easy, and it's difficult to be an aware consumer because there is just so much to try to understand and learn and know and fathom, which is a really big challenge. This is really hard. So beyond anything else, my sympathies, my empathies, because this is difficult. So don't blame yourself, don't beat yourself up if you bought something and later realized that it wasn't as sustainable as you thought it was. It's okay. This is hard. This is really hard. But yeah, I'm having a lot of fun with these. I feel like I am engaging with the community in ways that I can't when, I am researching a topic that I hope you will find interesting, or I am making something out of textile or fiber that I hope you will like, because in a very real sense, I am trying to actually engage with the things that you are asking for. And I hope you find this interesting as well, because I'm going to turn this into a semi-regular series, because I am enjoying this kind of digging through documentation and stuff to try to figure out what you are asking about, because that is going to be different from what I'm asking about. So I hope you're having fun as well. As always, sources and references for these shenanigans can be found in the description box below. If you wish to submit a question, I have built a Discord community server where you may do so. Because, I know some people are going to be sad that they can't just leave a YouTube comment, but those get lost. They get lost so quickly, and I can't guarantee that I will see them. Not that I can guarantee that if the Discord server grows too big either, but at least there we can separate things into different topics of conversation. So I think it's easier to keep track of things. So that is part of the reason why I'm not just asking you to just ask questions wherever and whenever, because it's going to be a time to try to keep track of that. But more importantly, the Discord server is not just for Ask Textile History though, and those kinds of questions. I started it with, these high hopes that it will grow into a thriving, inclusive community where we support one another in, growing that creative muscle and generally just support each other in becoming better human creatures. I know that, for me at least, I feel much better mentally when I create things and I don't just mindlessly consume content. And don't get me wrong here, I love consuming content like, a good book, a podcast, a video, good content that makes me feel good, and I do consume content. But I also need to create myself and exercise that creative muscle regularly, and I don't think I'm the only one in that. So I built this space for us to come together in sharing and uplifting one another in being more creative, no matter what that looks like to you. I am also trying to fill it with useful resources, links to my favorite archive.org books and pamphlets historically, or just good research or good books, and those kind of things to be easily accessible for you, so that you can pop on and maybe you'll find what you're looking for in, that list of resources, so that it's easy to find and not just, trying to remember that video from way back from then and did I even have that reference? Did I even use that reference there? So I'm trying to give, my favorite resources and other recommended resources so that it's easy for you to find them. And of course, we do this all while fighting those perfectionism tendencies that so many of us were raised with. In my house, we do our best to just do the thing. And of course, striving for excellence is something else entirely. Striving for excellence can be done in a good, healthy way, whereas toxic perfectionism just stops you from getting started in the first place. But I'm rambling. If that sounds like your jam, come join us. The link is in the description box below. That's it for this time. Thank you for watching and stay curious. Bye! Hello, madam. You want to join me? Don't tip over the tulips, kindly. Yes, show your butt to the camera, madam. That is very appropriate.